Peace and welcome back. Today I would like to talk about music. And specifically I would like to talk about how I use music. And it sounds quite odd because most people, they consume music. They don't use it as a tool, but they're just consuming it. Like they consume, I don't know, food. And when I look around and when I observe my surroundings and all the people, I see that there are specific kinds of people who hear or listen or consume a specific kind of music. If the music contains a lot of negativity, when when it is made out of very negative energy or negative vibes, then it is very often the case that this person resembles this kind of music. When we have, for example, hip hop. And the content of this hip hop rap is materialism. Yeah, the Air Max sneakers and the Rollie and the BMW or the Mercedes AMG, whatever. Then we see that the people who are listening to this, and they are not really listening to it, they're just having it sometimes just in the background. And all the day, or they are blasting it through their headphones or speakers, we find that those kind of people are more into materialism. One of their main goals in life is to possess an AMG or to possess a Rolex. So, in my life as an believing individual, I saw that there was a correlation between music and the one who consumes it, and that a specific group hears only a specific kind of music. And I was wondering to myself, well, is it just a correlation, or maybe it is a causation? Maybe the music is causing the consciousness of the listener to evolve in this certain way. And when I looked at myself, I could say yes, it had a very big impact in my thoughts, in my creativity, and in my in the development of my sense, of my hearing sense, of my structure, the structure of my character, how I developed certain personalities of mine. As you know, I made a video about how believers are human chameleons, that they can, when they act, when a believing person acts, then the other people cannot distinguish between a played version or the real one. So I can essentially be whoever I want to. Everybody will believe it, and a believer, he will notice that with the time. He will notice that eventually, and he will have his set. He will have his. It's like his deck of cards he can play out in different kind of situations, and as he grows, he can add more cards, and you will do that by observation. You have someone You think, oh, he resembles a very specific kind of personality, and you start to observe it. You start what kind of things he is wearing, how he's talking, and so on. And eventually you can just copy that, and you can do it on your own, and people will buy it. And this is how a believer goes through his life, how he protects himself, how it's like he covers his pure self in this facade, or in this different kind of masks, in the cards he's playing out from his deck, because he had always the feeling that, or he had the experience that his real face is hated. His good soul is hated in this evil world. So he does this. He does it on a very subconscious level, and he becomes aware of that, and then he will find himself using the different personalities to please different kind of scenarios he has in his life. Yeah. And a very big factor to enhance this state of consciousness, the different cards you have in your deck, is, or has been for me, the right and fitting music, the background theme that allows you to go deeper into this specific emotion, or the emotions which are required to show off this personality. And that's the difference. I was never a someone who consumed music just for the sake of it, but I used it to learn and to enhance my overall feelings. This is also a thing among believers, is that due to their nature of exclusiveness as a believer in a evil society, they do not have like the right emotional treatment, and nobody can really understand them, and they always have this very lonely mind, and this very they are completely alone in their emotions and in their thoughts, and they are sometimes they can slip out and have, like, I don't know what you can call friends, and it is of course rough, and it is of course very depressing sometimes, but eventually, like I said in my previous videos, God will eventually tell you why that is the case in his book, which is the guidance from him. And like I said, I was always using that to my advantage. Yeah. When I was in a state where I have to, where I was happy, I would of course listen to happy music, to sounds that resembled that kind of emotion I had. And I found myself very attached to Japanese soundtracks, because I found them very compelling to my lonely existence. And you have to understand that the Japanese, as a nation, as a tribe, when you can call it that way, as a culture, they have a very their outer lives are very stressful, and they are very controlled, and everything is strict, and so they develop a very big interior world. Their soul and their emotions are in the inside, and they have a very controlled life, a very desperate life. So the music and the art and everything is much deeper. It is much more complex. It is much more satisfying than in for example, Western countries. And you can see that when you look at any anime, any popular anime, that there is so much detail in it. There's so much deepness in it. When you compare it to, for example, a Hollywood blockbuster, it is. I cannot watch them. I have to be serious. Like, the only things I can or I would appreciate in a good Hollywood movie are like real fights. Like in John Wick, for example. And then I just watch it to try to copy the techniques, which I also applied successfully in my MMA trainings, which also a thing. As a believer, you can learn things that you like very, very quickly, and you don't need so much time like anybody else, because you do things on your own way, and you're always thinking about what is the best rational way to do it. And so you do it all like naturally, and that's the reason why you can learn things a lot quicker. But back to music. We were in the topic of Japanese art. And I have, like I mentioned in my previous videos, I have a very big playlist I call the soundtracks of my life, because I had a time where I was attached to hip hop and rap music, but I don't think that in a longer way that they are some kind of useful, because you have the human voice that is interacting with a soundtrack or a beat, and that is not. I don't know. It is occupying your ways of thought in a much bigger way, because you have to listen to the words and to the emotions of the person through the words, and you have to hear the beat. But when you have a soundtrack, you just have the soundtrack. You don't have a human voice, so that's a lot easier to digest. And in this playlist, soundtracks of my life, I have like over 200 different soundtracks from various kinds of games or shows, which I find very useful if I want to get into a specific state of consciousness. For example, there are a lot of fighting, of war themes, of soundtracks that enhance your will to train, your will to fight. And there are other ones which are very light, which are very happy, which are perfect for the morning when the first sun rays are coming in. And there are there are a lot of ones from my childhood that helped me keep going when the times were very dark. And it's essentially, when you look at that, all the soundtracks, and you combine them, you have a good idea what things look inside of my head. Kind of. And I'm very proud of this kind of list. And maybe you find it useful if a believer is listening to this or can even understand it in the slightest part. I don't know. And so this is one part I would like to talk about. The next one is about the recitation of the Quran. Like you know, I'm a believer in the Quran, and only a believer of God can actually believe in the Quran. Someone who does not believe in the Quran is excluded from the knowledge of the Quran. So the Quran is exclusively for those who can understand it. This is how it is. And the very interesting thing about the Quran and the recitation of the Quran is that it is hard to describe, but when I hear it, it is like the soundtrack or the beat is inside of the words. So it's like they are synchronized. And the variations of the Arabic recitation of the Quran are endless. You can variate them in an endless way. And this is what I have experienced, because I can recite the Quran in Arabic, and I can do it with perfect tajweed. I can do it with I can do all the different styles of all those popular recitators. I can implement my own styles, and I can vary like I want to. And the text always stays the same. So I can, for example, I can have the first chapter, which are 7 verses, but I can recite them in so many various ways, but they will always sound crisp. They will always sound in a rounded way. And as a child, I was very attached. I was very attached to the sound of the Quran. Always, I was very attached to it. And it is a blessing from God that I can hear, or I can learn that. I can learn the words. I can learn how to read the Arabic Quran just by hearing the words, just by hearing the recitations, and then they stay inside of my head, and sometimes they just pop up, and I have this song inside of my head, and I continue it, and it's very, very, very nice. So I have those two kinds of what you would say music. We have the Quran, which is the word of God, and which is of course the main thing. It's the most important thing you have in your life, essentially, because there is everything you need to know, and it's essential to know, to understand the world around you as a believer. This is why it's called the guidance, because it will guide you throughout your life. And on the other hand, we have soundtracks, or I have soundtracks which I use for specific events, for specific situations. For example, training, or having a walk, or deducing something. When I'm on the PC and I'm looking for something very specific, I have to dig into this. I have my special soundtracks for that too. And like I said, you will all find this on my playlist, Soundtracks of My Life. You should find it just by clicking on soundtracks. But I will close this talk after a last thing I would like to say, which is that I am focusing now on learning the whole Quran and the entirety of the text with understanding, because I learned, or I can, a lot of surahs by heart, but I never filled them with the right, with the right understanding. And now that I have a fairly good and reasonable translation of the Quran, I have the ability to study it properly. I have the ability to fill the words that I can already recite with the right meaning, which is kind of interesting, because back in my traditionalist years, I never had I never really had to or wanted to, but now I have the opportunity to do so. And when I learned 30 plus surahs already, I can easily learn the whole Quran just by hearing, and then by reading and studying the translation, I can fill in the meanings of it. And the reason I want to learn the whole Quran is because the Quran is the message to all mankind, and the tool to warn other believers, to reach out to other believers, to filter the believers out of the masses, is by a believer reciting the message. Because what we have now is only those who spurn guidance while claiming virtue who are reciting the Quran in Arabic. And I'm looking at them, and I'm looking at their style of recitation, and I look at their perverted faces, essentially. And I'm thinking to myself, well, this is odd that I never thought about doing that, actually. Like reciting it and sharing it with the world. Because when I recite it, and in Arabic, and I put my face on camera, and I set it up very nicely, and I have the proper translation. What my theory is, what my thesis is, that a believer who is not yet guided will see me. He will see, or he will hear the words of God, and he will understand it. He can understand it, and he will be guided through that. So I think this is more effective to drag more attention to my YouTube and to myself as a person, because every believer is very valuable. It is essentially the most valuable thing, the most valuable human you can have in your life is a believer, because he is the one who shares with you the experience of the truth, and he's the one you can rely on. He's the kind of friend you can have in this life. And that's what I'm focused on now, and I, God willing, hope to achieve it, and eventually you will see me reciting the Quran with the proper recitation, with the proper translation, and everything should look very beautiful. And God willing, I will reach out to some real believers, because in truth, when I look at my followers, 99.99% are, when they say they are believers, they are obviously liars. And they make it just more obvious the more input they give to me. And as a believer, the behavior of those who spurn guidance, of claiming virtue, is very, it is set out and detailed in the Quran. And the Quran says how you are acting, and how you try to deceive me and the believers and God in general. And God is also predicting the actions and the thoughts of the waverers, those who believe, and then they believe not, and then they believe again, and then they believe not, and they are in between the lines. But this is going to be my next video. It's going to be about waverers, because it's very important to that I share my experience in combination with the Quranic verses. So whoever is a believer and whoever will eventually understand what I'm saying will gain this very important knowledge for his own benefit, because it's sometimes very hard to understand actual verses when they are not connected to real life experiences. So this is what I'm going to do next. And I think my work on the ruling elite has been quite finished. I made a script for a very long video where I explain all the other things, but in my opinion, it is not necessary. It will come in handy when I actually meet a real believer and someone who will form with me a community, someone I will live together with, and then it is a lot more, it makes more sense to share this information with him. And so I think I said everything I could about how things are going to develop in the future, in which way mankind and history is heading. I gave almost all the proofs. I gave the proofs from the Quran itself, the implications of the verses itself, and also from the other side, from the elite, with the reappearance of Christ by Alice A. Bailey. And so I don't think that I will make another video about that again. And I'm shifting towards focusing more on actual verses and my experiences with them, and my inner world, my inner thoughts, my observations. And I also would like to make some just some things besides from talks, maybe some creative things. And in the meanwhile, God willing, I will enhance myself in purity. I will enhance myself in the understanding of God's word, in learning it by my heart with understanding, and prepare myself for the time coming. And that's basically it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something useful, and God willing, I will see you in the next one. Peace.